بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
محمد رسول الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ثم أما بعد. In a recent class that I have attended in a graduate school in Texas about transnational history, you come to the realization that the issue of traditional boundaries in our minds do not exist anymore. Traditional boundaries regarding geography, history, knowledge, everything almost in this life have become fluid. Means nations in the age of postmodern time and globalization, it seems that there is nothing such as national identity anymore. It was so ridiculous to see people probably 100 years ago, or maybe more than that a little bit, someone from the US, let's say, studying China or Japan. If you would like to study the history, it is something national. It would be in the boundaries of the national state. But now we see that everybody is almost getting into the issue of globalization. And those boundaries right now have become so fluid that people can interchange and exchange thoughts, ideas, even heritage right now. So you find someone who's non-Muslim interested in the heart of the Muslim land and giving statements about Islam and Muslims. You have some Muslims also interested in the heart of Europe, America, and so on, giving statements about the European culture and other people and so on. It has become something that is very acceptable today in academia as well as in public culture. Orientalism is one of these fields that once held this position and it became a Eurocentric discipline. Means something monopoly of Europe until recent time. When the rest versus the West starts growing up and it starts getting into the field of academia, they found so many of these writings once were written for the European audience concerning them. So they found it very offensive. And when they started answering back, that's where the clash of civilization came back again to the picture. The Prophet ﷺ unfortunately has become the target of a new wave of attacks against his honor ﷺ. And as my brother Sheikh Yaser just mentioned, it is the responsibility of every single Muslim to stand up for the honor of the Prophet ﷺ and defend his honor. And that's what we're trying to do over here. We're trying as much as possible explain how should we defend the honor of the Prophet ﷺ against the Orientalist critique. Sheikh Yaser spoke a little bit in details about this subject and gave many examples. What I'm going to be doing over here, inshallah ta'ala, is to find another way. How should we understand these waves of attacks? And I believe personally that the best way of defending the honor of the Prophet ﷺ against these attacks of Orientalists is by understanding the philosophy and the approach. What's their philosophy and what is their approach to these incidents of Islamic history, of the Islamic identity, and the symbols of Islam and Muslims? Many Orientalists of our time, regardless of their background, whether they're coming from a religious background, academic background, or even nationalists, radical nationalists, they all come and attack the Prophet ﷺ in one way or another, whether it's from a religious perspective or academic perspective. Our discussion would be over, inshallah ta'ala, these ideas and these philosophies and approaches. If we study the history of Orientalism, we would realize that it went through different phases, mainly two: historic and modern. And in the historic and modern, both of them, they made their main focus, or the primary focus of the discussions, the Middle East and what it represents, mainly Islam and Muslims, and sometimes Arabs in particular. So the misrepresentation of Islam has become very, very popular in their writings. You will see that Islam, unfortunately, being demonstrated in a way that is again targeting Muslims just to the European or non-Muslim audience, to the Westerners in particular. So we see that in academia, in public, in the media, Muslims has been given specific stereotypes. Whenever we say Islam and Muslims, there's a specific image, at least the classical image back in the 70s and the 80s, and now it is changing a little bit. If we go a little bit classical, and see how the image, or what the reason behind these stereotypes the Muslims and the Arabs they had in the mind of Europeans and Westerners. According to Edward Said in his book about Orientalism, there are 4 reasons. Number 1, the hostile history between the two regions, the West, that's Europe in particular, and the rest, in the Middle East in particular. So there is kind of hostility between the two nations, the two geographical locations. And definitely with that, now with hostility, culture would be also intertwined in this conflict. And whether this is against the Arabs, the Muslims, and even the Ottomans in particular in the last few generations. The second, which is something contemporary, the Arab-Israeli conflict. The Arab-Israeli conflict is actually putting more fuel into the hostility they had from historical backgrounds. And this is something we could see specifically after the Second World War. The more the tension rises between the East, the West and the Middle East, we said more stereotypes have been put about Muslims into the media of the West. And the third, the cultural negligence. I'm saying cultural negligence of the West towards the rest. There seems to be no interest in learning anything about the East or the Orient, at least until recent time. And I speak in a lot of universities, I go to a lot of churches, and I speak with different actual organizations, and subhanAllah, it's really amazing how much you see people living in the 21st century and the little they know about Islam or Muslims. Why? You ask them, haven't you had any access to learn about Islam and Muslims? If they had any, unfortunately, just like Sheikh Yaser was saying, was completely distorted. And we will talk about this inshallah ta'ala and why this happened. And the fourth actual reason for this distorted image would be the oil factor and the desert fantasies. Probably if you watch the movies of the 1970s, 60s about the Muslims and the Arabs, they're all about oil, about deserts, camels, sheikhs who are very wealthy and rich, and they're going after their own desires. So they put a specific stereotype in the mind of the people. This was, of course, classical, because the book of Edward Said was written in the late 1970s. Today, adding to this, we have, number one, the rise of the Muslim nations in the world. After the Second World War, there wasn't really much value, political value, economical value to the Muslim world. Today, it has changed. So more and extra attention is being given to these regions. Number two, the massive immigration of Muslims, of the Orient, the Muslims coming to the West. And most of you people are probably representation of this phenomenon right now, which means you're going to have to direct contact between two different cultures. How to define or redefine this right now gathering of the two cultures has become the focus of these studies. Number three, the attacks of September 11th. Unfortunately, those tragic attacks, they led to another subsequent events, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Everybody has become interested right now in this phenomena. Why? Because whether you like it or not, it would influence your life. At least the way you behave and even your daily routine. And one just very simple example, gas prices. It's all because of this issue. It's all because of this war, so it has become very, very important for people to realize and understand this concept and where those right now, what we call them Middle East experts, the contemporary, of course, Orientalists, are coming from when they talk about Islam and Muslims. So this right now has given the issue of Islam and Muslims totally different dimension, geopolitical, cultural, and religious agenda. Let's go over the methodology of the Orientalists. And I said that we can view this from two perspectives, historical and modern. When it comes to the historical approach, we see that it also went through two different stages. The early stage, and then we have the modern stage. The early stage goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. And Sheikh Yaser quoted some of those monks, they call them monk scholars. And they initiated the issue of going after Islam and Muslims, specifically in their texts, the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. According to Immanuel Wallstein, this stage, as it goes all the way back to the Middle Ages, marked the establishment of this first generation of Orientalists. And those are the monk scholars. In the Church of Vienna, the Church Council of Vienna back in 1312, they established church for specific languages. And Arabic was one of these languages. You can guess that Hebrew would be there as well as Greek and Assyrian languages. Means those Semitic languages and related to the Semitic languages. The focus of those monk scholars was the language, religion,